Thank you very much for having me and inviting me and being involved in this very interesting course. I have not presented something similar to this before. So in the beginning, I'll just, hopefully this is the right course. Prior to this, I sent the wrong course.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
there's
the
another
right one.
594 course that I mistakenly sent prior to this one, and so that doesn't make any sense. So I am, as Dr. Solas described, a pathologist with LABMP here at the University of Alberta and the hospitals associated with the University of Alberta. My name is Khaldoon Aljerian. My office is very close to Dr. Solas's office, and that's my contact information email, just in case we lose touch and you don't see me again, but you have a burning question at any time, just shoot an email. I think since this was such a small class, I thought it would be a larger class. We could probably just do we don't have to have questions at the end of the class. We could just do it as we go. So if you want, we can start by getting to know you and just like one line of who you are.
Yeah, or more than one.
One or two lines, yeah.
Yeah, how can I limit myself to one line?
Yeah. My name is Ella. I'm an undergrad biology student who's interested in learning about the future of pharmacology.
Amazing. Nice to meet you, Ella.
I'm Lean, and I'm a biopsych double major, and I just thought the class would be interesting because I've been into science fiction my whole life, so yeah.
Interesting.
Hi, my name is Sarjana. I'm an undergraduate psychology student. I'm very excited for today's lecture and to hear about how pathology can kind of play into ethics and just ethical considerations.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm a fourth year psychology student with a biology minor, and I have a lot of interest in everything to do with the future of kind of medicine and dentistry as well. So.
My name is Hish. I'm doing my first years of master's in modeling data and predictions, like a math and stats / comp-sci program, and I did my undergrad in comp-sci, so I work on a lot of like machine learning and models. So yeah, just like.
Great. Well, nice to meet you all, and I hope you feel comfortable at any time just asking any questions. So I like to call the autopsy the final consultation. I also sometimes may revert from autopsy to post-mortem examination sometimes. It's the same word, it just depends on the department what they would like to call it. And then I call it the final consultation because medically the last consult you could most likely receive would be after death. And so today we want to talk about the future of autopsy and how it looks. So at the end of the presentation, you should be able to understand that the autopsy is one of the end-of-life discussions that a physician may have or a healthcare worker would have. Primary healthcare worker with the before you die with the deceased and after with the family. And then the second thing would be ethical issues related to what happens after death, either legally, culturally, ethically. Some of them overlap, some of them are the same, some of them are different. And then the last point would be what are the possible directions the autopsy may be going with regard to new technology, AI learning, and different options that we have almost daily at our fingertips. So the first is end of life. So this is probably sort of like just to break the ice of what is an autopsy and what does a pathologist do as far as a postmortem exam or an autopsy or postmortem examination. So the way I like to think of the autopsy it's a diary of all the pathologies that have happened during our life. So from conception till you die, you collect different changes in your cells, in your organs, and at autopsy you'll be able to show these changes that you see at the gross or macroscopic level, or microscopic level and molecular level, chemical level, toxicological analysis. All of that will show these different changes that we've collected throughout our life at different stages of life. Similarly, the diary of a young girl, which is probably one of the most popular books ever written regarding a diary. And so I just quote, "I want to go on living even after my death." The reason that makes sense to me is because a writer would like everyone to understand and enjoy their literature. Similarly, I find that if we are able to receive any information, medical information, healthcare information from the dead, then that helps both that person give back to the community and also to healthcare in general. So in a way, the information received from the dead helps the living. So I call that part a diary of life, and it's by the Autopsy. So what is the meaning of the word autopsy? My understanding is it is originally from the Greek word autos and opsis, which means to see with one's own eyes. So it is not through an image from radiology, it is not through a chemical test that you suggest that this chemical test indicates this or that. It's actually seeing that organ at the gross level and identifying that this looks different than normal and therefore abnormal, and I should maybe take a biopsy, I should take maybe a sample for microscopy or electron microscopy or for molecular. And you would have to decide that when you see it, because many of these different tests require different fixation. So you would not be able to many times go back, because usually, you know, we will have like funeral arrangements, cremation, etc. So you cannot go back and take more tissue. So to see with one's own eyes, to identify mechanism of disease, to confirm disease that we already know, to discover different pathways or complications of disease, the different mortality and morbidity can be registered, to teach undergrad, graduate, postgraduate, to teach medical students, pathology residents, non-pathology residents, the understanding of how organs look when they are diseased, and to train future pathologists. So what does the pathologist do? So after we receive authority, an authority is granted in two ways, either by consent of the family if it's a non-required autopsy, but if it's a required autopsy by law, so a medical legal autopsy, sometimes called a coroner autopsy, in some provinces, in our province, a medical examiner's autopsy, they will give the authority, so there's no need for consent. And so once that is established and the identity of the deceased is established, we take care of our safety, so all precautions to prevent disease, communicable other disease. And then we start our examination. Our examination begins with history, which is usually in the chart, and in the cases of, most cases of hospital deaths. We look at the imaging, previous laboratory tests. We do a physical examination. I use that term to help medical students understand what we do, but we call it external examination. in autopsy, which is something that you may have had also if you've gone to a physician. And the second is the surgical examination, which is not, which is something rarely performed in medicine, especially nowadays because of the advancement of CT and MRI. And we call it an internal examination. And in surgical examination, it would be like a exploratory laparotomy, let's say. They would open to see, to find what kind of disease is there. But because of CT, MRI, ultrasound, that's less and less used. But we call it internal examination in autopsy, and that is to incise the thorax, the neck, the abdomen, and the pelvis to examine those organs, and also incise the back of the head so that we are able to examine, remove the skull and examine the brain. In the end, we will summarize all of this information through reporting and communicating to the right agencies, the different agencies that have requested the autopsy, and you would know that from the authority. So in the case of a clinical or hospital autopsy, it would be the family doctor, let's say, or the last attending doctor that had requested it, so we would communicate to them. And then we give recommendations regarding that disease, regarding what information should be shared with vital statistics of Alberta, and what the family may or may not need to think, the family physician may not or may not need to think of with regard to this case. This is about safety and the different protective equipment that we use, and there are different links to that we could, if needed, we could go back to. The autopsy procedure, this is also a link to the autopsy procedure. And then what does a pathology do? This is an example of the worksheet that we would use. And then just the epidemiological information and the information of the healthcare workers taking care of the autopsy. And then what additional additional ancillary tests are we performing, such as photography, cultures, electron microscopy, microbiology, etc. And then we talked about what do we do with an external examination. So an external examination, as I said, is similar to a physical examination. It may be a little bit more detailed. And then we have a diagram just to note what we have seen. The next is the internal examination. So that means we would have to do surgical incisions to reach the organs in the chest, abdomen, pelvis, and in the head. And if needed, the spinal cord is an optional also examination. There are other more complex examinations, but they're more specific to specific types of autopsies. And so let's say we will divide it into the different cavities: the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, digestive system, genitourinary system, endocrine system, reticuloendothelial system, and central nervous system. And then after that, we would summarize what we have, which we usually use in the preliminary examination or preliminary report after the autopsy, naming the different gross findings that we saw. Go ahead.
Does everyone get an autopsy, or it depends on the cause of death?
Yeah, so with regard the two autopsy types, so the Fatalities Act in Alberta, they would receive a referral to the medical examiner's office. In some provinces, it's called the coroner's office. And they have a list of required autopsies. And they would judge, and they would give the authorization regardless of the family's opinion through the legislation that they have of the Fatalities Act. And that is accessible to all residents of Alberta, but also anyone that has the internet, really. And so, in those cases, they will perform an autopsy. Usually it is suspicious or of non-natural, so homicide, suicide, accidental, and they would judge. If the family requests the autopsy only, they would need to consent for the autopsy, and then we would receive that consent. So that's the way we would receive authorization, and anyone in Alberta can request an autopsy. So anyone can, that second type, which is the non-required type, requires consent of the family, and anyone can request that. And then, we just, this is just the weights of the different organs, and then the microscopic sections that we've sampled. Another example that I, when searching the internet, found that I felt that explains what the autopsy is. And this painter, I can't remember the last time I looked it up. I forget 5 minutes after I look it up. But this painter, I think, is French, and tried to in the painting image truth as at the bottom of the well. And then the lens, which in my mind is the lens that the original microscope would reflect light from the sun onto your slide to see the slide, and serves to give you the microscopic understanding of what kind of disease is there. But obviously the painter has a different idea, and so the truth at the bottom of the well, but then has the lens there, and then when truth uses the lens to reflect light at the bottom of the well, you can actually see truth. In my mind, see the morphological changes in the cell and tissue to make the diagnosis, and truth, her mirror, and the well. And then so to me, this is the autopsy report coming out, or the pathology report coming out, and no longer submerged or lost, so that information is actually gained instead of, let's say, cremated only, or a burial, or etc. So for me, as a person of interest in autopsy pathology, I feel that is the best way to show all truth, really. So one of the ways we examine, so in this case, the thorax and the abdomen is exposed. The larger organ here is the liver. Here is the neck with the reflection of the skin above, and then here we see the lungs. The heart is reflected, so you can see the empty pericardium here. And so everything is to see with one's own eyes. Now it's very obvious what is happening. We take measurements of the different organs. Here we're measuring the left ventricle of the heart. We take samples of these organs for microscopic examination. In this case, as compared to the last case, you can see obvious disease, where here when we reflected, the lungs were easily seen, whereas here you can see it is very difficult to see the lungs, and that's because of the mesothelial plaques that you can see in asbestosis. They encase the lungs, sometimes near complete encasing of the lungs, and similarly in asbestosis to provide, let's say, for worker compensation. So this is another request that the family may have to refer to worker compensation, is to show the asbestos bodies. And asbestos bodies is quite difficult, like you would need to enlarge it 600 times to see. Many times they are engulfed by macrophages. As you can see here, the macrophage has almost completely engulfed this asbestos body, and the asbestos body itself is actually the thread that is keeping the, so the blue is the iron, and not the asbestos body or fiber. The fiber itself is in the middle. I hit this one by, I would say, I would lie and say that's my experience, but this is by luck, where you can see the asbestos body in the center, and then, so the way, like a rosary or like a, it depends on your culture, we call it sibha or misbaha or rosary, where the thread keeps the beads in place, right? And so you could only see this with a microscope, and then in this case you would be able to provide help for the family because Worker Compensation Board of Alberta will provide them with financial support. And in other cases, sometimes a surprise diagnosis that you thought maybe had disappeared. And so this person had melanoma years ago, I think about 12 years before. And then after, when we, the autopsy was delayed because of difficulty to find consent or to achieve the proper consent. And then, and so what happened was we saw all these dark spots everywhere on the body. However, we thought that this may be postmortem change because of the decomposition that the body will go through if not refrigerated properly and not kept properly. And so when we took even random sections, we found these large, so this is, a section of heart. So the red is the myocardium or the heart cells or myocardiocytes. The large bluish nodules, like this, here also, are these ugly neoplastic melanocytes. So that's melanoma, and it was in almost every organ. There wasn't, I don't think we found an organ that didn't have it there. So that would help even to correct the, so vital statistics for Alberta that base the mortality and morbidity on, that would help correct that. And other cases where it's not something that is thought that had been treated or eradicated, but you may be, the radiology may be confusing, such as in this type of case where this type of case where it was labeled as pneumonia, but was not improving and needed to be transferred to an ICU hub, such as the university ICU, due to refractile or untreated pneumonia, whereas in this case, this is a multifocal mucinous adenocarcinoma of the lung, but the way that it grows, the mucin that fills the alveolar spaces looks like the exudate or the pus, if you may, that would be in pneumonia. So in radiology, it should look the same actually. And you can see here, instead of having neutrophils and pus, you have these adenocarcinoma cells that secrete mucin. So it's a very similar texture and very similar fluid, so the radiologist may confuse the two. So I'm not sure how we are with time because I don't want to lose, maybe we'll do one case and if we'll do another. So in this case, this person had came in a 60-something-year-old female with morbid obesity came with epistaxis pneumonia and suddenly collapsed. The past medical history includes many of the common diseases that we have in the community, and then when we took a section from the pulmonary artery of the lung, we found this. We found what is called pulmonary embolism. So basically, it is a clot that develops during life, and usually in the lower limbs, and then it shoots up into the heart, and the first narrowing is what we see in the pulmonary artery. And you can see in this stain, which is a special type, an MSV stain, you can see that the clot develops these fibrin lines or fibrinous lines. The RBCs here are yellow, and then the less pink areas like these are the platelets. This is the wall of the pulmonary artery here, and these are the fibrin lines. That's how we can tell that this is a true antemortem or a clot that has developed before death. This is a different stain, PTAH. Also, it shows these fibrinous, dark navy lines, and this is the wall of the pulmonary artery. CD61 is a stain, immunohistochemical stain that will stain brown the platelets. And then this is Dr. Zahn, and these are the lines that he described, the fibrinoid or fibrin lines in clots. It reminded me of two things. One was the Smucker's peanut butter and jelly. It was a very common thing, or a very popular thing when I was a kid. And so lines of fibrin and lines of white and red blood cells, or red blood cells, and then platelets. But also when flying back from Calgary to Edmonton, you can see many of the, as the plane is going down, you can see many of the farms also have very similar lines, which I thought was interesting, especially that it has this blue pollen very neat, close. And this was described by Dr. Zahn. And then I had a very similar picture also that struck my mind, because in an MSB, that's a nerve there, and it's blue on MSB, and you can see it's very similar to that pond there. It's just that when the images stick in your brain, you start to compare and contrast. And you can see the CD61 shows the platelets in a similar fashion, and these are just different stains showing my admiration of this clot and how it looks like the Smucker's peanut butter and jelly. So we'll just jump this case, because I want more interaction, and I think I've proven some of my points, but we can always go back to those cases, no worries. So what does it mean, death delights to help the living? It means that that information that we gain from the dead will help the living first, so identify different disease, identify disease that may affect the community, or identify disease that may affect the family, so that is genetically related to that person. And so we maintain quality of patient care by feedback to our clinical colleagues, develop, modify efficacy of treatments. So even though many of the diseases are already described or known, but many of the treatments are new. And so it would be a good idea to figure out, how are these treatments doing? Are they doing better? Are they doing worse? Are they changing? Are they affecting other organs? How did they affect the disease itself? And why did they not affect that disease, let's say? And then obviously we said teaching. So if we don't teach our medical students, our residents, we won't have healthcare workers that understand disease. And then, so future pathologists obviously, and the death certificate, which is so vital for our vital statistics and how we guide our budget in an ethical way, would be that if there are diseases that are causing more mortality and morbidity, we should direct our budget towards that. And so this is a medical certificate of death, and it shows how the different areas are filled out, and this information will go to vital statistics, and they will use that for like budgeting and other statistics. So we did touch actually about the second part in general, and which is the ethical issues. So the ethical issues, so forensic versus clinical autopsy, which means required or medical legal / coroner's autopsy / medical examiner's autopsy, versus a clinical / hospital autopsy, non-required autopsy, an autopsy that requires consent from the family. So those are the two different basically ethical issues in autopsy. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because that is an essential part of understanding where we're going. Do you have any?
I had a question not about this, but about like the case study from before.
Yeah.
So, since you're going through like such extensive measures of like, you know, all the staining and
Yeah.
looking at all these different kind of parts of the body,
Yeah.
how do you kind of dictate which areas you're gonna fixate on and what you're not going to fixate on? Because you kind of see that you did like, I guess, 8 or 9 different types of stains just on the pulmonary artery.
Don't tell my boss. I do too many stains. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like how did you kind
Yeah.
of dictate that? Because when I looked at all the conditions, I was kind of wondering how you bridge that gap.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's why we go back here.
Mhm.
So once we've established we have the authority, so we have consent,
Mhm.
right? And we have established that we are safe, and so we start the examination, we start by the history. You have to read the chart. You have to read the chart, we have to understand. If you have needed any clarifications, you have to go back, talk to the physician, figure out what are the diseases. So that is a very, so the healthcare workers in general will always start at history. Yeah. And then, and as opposed to someone that came to the physician complaining of a disease that they've never had, many times we can actually cheat because our colleagues have already done a lot of the imaging and laboratory tests. And so we are guided by these. And so we, like, I remember my mentor in Florida, Dr. Haima, amazing gentleman, he said, you don't need the autopsy. And I asked him, what do you mean? Because that's what we do. He's like, if you don't know what the diagnosis is and the differential, sort of what this case is going to be, then you shouldn't start. You should never start before already knowing what you think is going to go on, right? And so you cannot enter like a complex cardiac surgery or aorta surgery case without knowing exactly what happened, when it happened. Because just like a barber, once you cut, you can't go back, right? So if I come in with a razor and just, you know, take out your hair, I cannot go back. I have to ask you, what do you want? What do you want to look like, right? And so that's the same thing. We need to look at the history, the imaging, the laboratory tests, ask your colleagues before you go in, and then you approach. Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, very important actually. Yeah.
So then just to follow up then, so would you have cases where if you have such surety in what you're looking for, you can skip the physical examination, or is that another type of like surety that you need to
Yeah,
go
so
through?
this is, these, like the physical examination, which is the external examination, you have to do it.
You have to.
Yeah, it's just part of a protocol,
Protocol.
so you don't miss anything.
Right.
And then we do, even when we're taking samples, sometimes sample a little bit another piece. So one piece is for micro, but the other smaller, small piece would be, we call it for, I don't know why it's skipping my mind. We sample for a clinical stock, they call it. And so just in case you need to go back. But then again, as what you pointed out, if I'm going to do, let's say, flow cytometry on a lymph node for lymphoma, I cannot put that in formaldehyde. So you have to know before, because once you put it into formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, if you put it in RPMI, it guides what you can test. If you put it in formalin, you can later say, I want to take cultures for microbiology because they want to grow it. You put it in formaldehyde. You've basically sterilized the entity. So yeah, so going in, you really have to know what you're doing. It will be difficult. You can always stop and call. Because, I mean, as opposed to a live patient, they're not under anesthesia. So you can stop. It will not affect and call someone, have them come down. Or there came a time, once I did a frozen section. So you can do that. Also, don't tell my boss that I did a frozen section, not an autopsy. Yeah. So that's very important, actually. It is, because there's, I mean, you're looking for all the diseases, right? And so you have to guide yourself. Otherwise, you'll never finish. And you will miss what you're looking for. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so we're guided after that by the gross. So the internal examination, we're guided by the gross. So if it weighs normal, when we examine it, it looks normal. We may not even take a piece for micro, because everything seems to be going the right way, right? Yeah. But there are some organs, regardless, we take. So heart, lung, liver, kidney, you know, those are there's a movie called The Usual Suspects. I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah. So The Usual Suspects with Kaiser Sose and, yeah, I can't remember. But I mean, the usual suspects are always sampled, because these are the ones that are always in question. And so authorization, we talked about the Office of Chief Medical Examiner's Office / Coroner's Office, and then the clinical, which is a requested autopsy, and then also the extent. Is it full? Is it partial? Is it only one organ? Is there a specific organ that the family does not want examined? Let's say, for example, sometimes they don't want the brain to be examined, or they don't want the heart, or they don't want the liver to be examined for any cultural reasons. So ethical considerations, always changing the legislation. We talked about the required autopsy, the consent, and informed consent. We talked about budget constraints. No, we didn't talk about that. We did sort of where I was overspending, but that's for always I use the, I'm teaching a resident, and we're a resident and medical university site, so I always use that as my reason for asking for some of these interesting stains. Alteration to medical education is also always an issue, so less and less medical education is dependent on autopsy as before. And then retention of organs, as we said, we take smaller and smaller amounts in the last decades of tissue. We used to take, in the late 90s, early 2000, a good proportion, because we would do the next day for the medical students course, we would do gross presentation of the autopsy, because autopsy is difficult for medical students to attend because they have a specific schedule, whereas the autopsy could be at any time. And so we had those. We don't have those anymore because we cannot retain organs or a large amount of organs. And then timing of consent, and usually one of the issues for autopsy, because many times only a junior primary healthcare provider will be there, and they may not know what an autopsy is, and therefore difficult to explain to the family the importance or what would happen. So that is many times one of the obstacles in ethics for an autopsy. So at different times, one of our famous Canadian physicians is Dr. Osler, and later on went to help establish with 3 other physicians the Johns Hopkins Hospital. And they used to, I believe he was an internist, but he used to attend and even perform autopsies. And so they were really well versed, I would say, in autopsy. And then one of my mentors in Toronto is Dr. Chamberlain, and he, as a medical student, would attend autopsies, but not perform them. And the staff, usually as a pathologist, you would perform an autopsy, but as a non-pathologist, you would not. But previously, many of the non-pathologists would attend and understand what an autopsy is. Now, medical students and non-pathology residents have probably never heard of an autopsy. Attendance is a whole new ballgame. And so that's, for me, I view it as unfortunate, but I'm not in charge of education internationally or nationally, or even in my house maybe. My kids study what they want. But at the end of this presentation, and this is why we're here today, what are the possible future directions of autopsy? Do we have time? So currently we do histology, we do microbiology, toxicology, immunohistochemistry, electron microscopy, molecular and clinical genetics, and banking of tissue for future tests. And I always say this before because somebody, the next slide I showed, and some people had a feeling of that I was going somewhere politically. I just mean this as a joke. It's not as a political thing, but I use MAGA for Make Autopsy Great Again and nothing else, right? Now I'm not advocating how other people vote or view things, but for me, autopsy is my pathway that I chose, and I thought that maybe we should make green hats, maybe for MAGA, for Make Autopsy Great Again. And the current path or the present path for post-mortem examination for the pathologists and physicians is sort of away from where the future is currently, I think. And thanks to you, and thanks for inviting me, I sort of started thinking in this way because of this type of course. And so in the end, what we want to get is this, where we have the pathologist and the physician and the future all together, and that, therefore making the postmortem or the autopsy highlight what it should and where it should be going. And so when I looked at the future of autopsy, I saw 2 main things, I believe, two main things, which would be reducing workload, and the second thing was replacing humans/safety and diagnosis. So, and in the first, many of the pathology, but even the healthcare systems want to reduce the budget, want to reduce workload and effort, and increase speed, but still keep the quality. And so one of the things I noticed in that paper that so when you see this in presentation, you'll see all the links below. And it has the links to the paper, and it has the links to, you'll see England and Wales, where most of in the English-speaking countries, most of our systems, like the coroner or the autopsy services, has been inherited by those systems in England, and they still have an autopsy rate of 23% of deaths. We have a 7%, and we were speaking of some Central European countries and Scandinavian countries, which have well over 70% autopsy rates. And so in our case, I think, I'm not sure if we want to decrease it, but maybe I view it in a way where we would like to increase the numbers, but at the same time decrease the workload, if that makes sense. So it will not increase the effort, but it will increase our numbers and get more information from the autopsy. And so how would we do that? Well, one way would be to increase safety, speed and diagnosis through, I don't know if I click on this, will that work? I hope it does.
If you're in...
Oh, well, is it blocked or did I do something?
I think it's loading.
Oh,
Canada and have over $10,000 of debt, payday loans, credit cards, and lines of credit that you can't pay off or get to zero. First of all,
boy.
don't worry, you're not alone. And here's the good news. We can make the next year better for you. Within 48 hours,
Okay, so
So I think the sound for that is over there. Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, I have a way to do it. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so-
can turn it off there, but
Yeah,
if you want to modulate the sound,
yeah.
it's here. See with this thing. you can
Okay.
modulate.
Or, well, that solved the visual also. Yeah, and so the idea here that I wanted to show,
I think it will come back.
is that we're able through a Virtobot, which is a word that in the University of Zurich, they have started what they call a Virtopsy. And what they do
I
is,
think you just have to turn on the TV.
What?
I think, yeah, you just have to press, oh, there we go.
oh, okay, there we go.
Cool.
And so, is there a way to, I think that's pretty big size, but let's see if I can. Yeah, so what they've done is they've used post-mortem mapping through CT and sometimes MRI, and then after that, you are able to robotically insert a needle into the body, targeting the correct area through a robot, which matches the body after scanning it, and it matches the radiology that you have, whether it's CT or MRI. And I think in this case it looks like it might be CT. And that's from the University of Zurich. It's a company I think they've established called Virtopsy, and this is a Virtobot. And so you would be able to work so if it's an infectious disease, if it's a decomposed body, if it's an unknown disease, you would be mapping it outside of that room. So you would not be as far as safety, as safety and actually also precision, because robotic is much more precise than manual, right? Because you're just going to put it on the exact site where you would like it to process the needle biopsy. So that is one, and so that increases safety and it increases I think Apple knows that I don't like it. It is working up. So how do I get back to my presentation?
So
Is
I
it-
think,
Do I just close it?
Safari?
How do you close? Do I press the red? Yeah.
I think it might be one of these other, wait,
Might be, I don't know.
click on Safari.
Safari. Oh, is it, is the screen touch? I think I might have closed the whole thing.
Well,
Or is it in the back?
kind of,
Yeah, so the idea is to merge robotic surgery, sorry about that, robotic surgery, CT MRI, and body scanning with taking the biopsy, and therefore you've solved you have more precision, you have more safety for the pathologist, and the speed will be higher because you will be able to examine faster, and you will be able to examine prior to when you start, even if they don't have prior radiology. However, as you may probably have thought, that one of the obstacles to that would be budget. Who's going to buy that kind of equipment when a pathologist, all you need is like an old pair of scissors from the OR, and oh, I went too fast. And I think that is a similar, but this time I will not choose to enlarge it because then I will ruin something went wrong. Guess. Well, let me see. Maybe they don't want me to use YouTube, I don't know. But in a similar way, what they've done here in the 3D autopsy reconstruction is they've showed how we can actually precisely find the organ that we would like to autopsy in a similar fashion. A third one that I thought was interesting that I've actually seen before, because we had one case in Ontario where someone died and the cardiac fellow came down, and because if there's an implantable device you have to deactivate it, so that cardiology fellow came down and they communicated directly with the company of that device, and we could see actually the exact time that device registered death to the second.
wow.
And I thought that was amazing, and in the paper they said it, and I think, I don't know, like, I would open that up for discussion. What do you think a problem with that would be if we suggested that everybody should have some kind of, because we have pacemakers, we have diabetic monitoring, we have also defibrillators, right? But what if we suggested more information than that to be registered for everybody?
Well, if I can just reflect on that. So if you think of an AI assistant, right? So it goes beyond something external. It will become something that you regard as part of
your body. Yeah.
And many people you know, or maybe even yourself, will never turn it off, right? So solitude's gone, your own creativity, the test of what your brain can do without AI, you're never gonna have that again, right? So one of the things that I plan to do in the next little while is to sensitize people to what a big impactful change that will be. So this could just be a part of that. That could be a little part. I mean, the AI assistant could also be monitoring things in your body all the time, right? At whatever you want, you know? Yeah, and this is not just something that's science fiction. I mean, people are planning this so actively, and they're talking about, you'll never be alone, you know?
Yeah.
Is that good? I think it's good to be alone with your thoughts, at least occasionally, rather than always having the AI assistant there. But you may not feel that way. And if you're just thinking about external performance, maybe your whole projection to the world of what you're doing and what you are will be so much better with AI, you can't imagine not using it, right? It's like, you know, me wearing glasses or having a watch, it's just a part of me, you know? But it will be so impactful, and you will lose skills, right? If you never have to be creative again, because you're always using AI for the creative part of things, then your ability to be creative will obviously degrade, right? Yeah, and all sorts of other things. So have you guys thought at all about that? Is this a new subject? Yeah.
I feel like when it comes to creativity, AI will help us be more creative. And also when it comes to devices like this, like let's say something like a watch. Like I have a watch that like I usually mainly wear at night to track my sleep and like for example when I'm like doing activities. I feel like if something that is also connected to AI, as long as it's just for monitoring purposes, I think I would be fine with that. But if it has like abilities, for example, like you know how like if someone's having a heart attack, you give them, I don't know what the procedure is called. Yeah, the defibrillator. Like I feel like if I had a gadget or something that like you would have it attached to your heart or something that could give you that, I would be scared that like if, for example, if the AI didn't want me to be alive, it would just like misuse that, you know, to like, so there's always like, I feel like there's like some.
I think it goes way beyond that. In that you may feel that you have inadequate will and willpower, right? There's a way you'd like to live that you can't because you're weak and you can't make yourself make those food choices and exercise choices and so on, right? But with AI, you could, right? And you never forget anything because the things your brain forgot, the AI would know. And like if you meet somebody in the street and your brain can't remember their name, the AI would still, you know, so your interaction with other humans becomes flawless, right? But something's lost, right? And like your name, your identity, the whole thing is suddenly less important. Why does that name matter? In fact, everything people know about you is AI based, and it's been years since you've done anything without AI to really show what your basic skills are, you know. And so, doesn't that sound to you like something that ordinary didactic teaching doesn't work for that? So we're putting it in poetry and music and doing a musical album with these ideas. And I think that's where they should sit too, because we don't really know what the answer is, right? It isn't that I have a specific answer to give you, that you know, you should spend at least 5 minutes a day with the AI turned up. I don't know what that time is. 5 minutes a week, 5 minutes a year, I don't know. Yeah.
I personally love my solitude time. Like without it, like for example, when I spend so much time socializing, I have like a social battery, it like runs out and I need to go home and just like spend time like reading or writing or like whatever. Like I feel like without that, like I need that like reflection of like just spending time with myself to work on my confidence,
right.
And like have something.
No, that's right. Like if you look at the friendship between Rich Sutton and me, he's an introvert, I'm an extrovert. So the more time he spends with people, the less good he feels, right? Where the more time I spend with people, the better I feel. But don't you think those are modifiable features? If you wished in the era of AI, you could change that, and you could suddenly have, you'd be the perfect extrovert. Nobody knows that you're really, introvert inside, because the AI can fill in all those gaps and make you seem fun and affable and good at interacting with people, when the native you wouldn't be like that at all, but the AI is just helping you fake the interaction. Yeah.
Well, my thought process kind of, if we're talking about the fact that you can kind of find out when you're dying to the second, I feel like looking at it like from a consumer's point, if we're talking about AI and technology that can improve quality of life and the efficiency at which you're kind of enjoying life, that's something you can market to a consumer that they'll take and accept. But if we're talking about something, like when we're talking about the case of like putting that device that can monitor your bodily functions and tell you, you're gonna or it marks when you're gonna die. If that malfunctions, I can imagine that being so distressing to a person, right? So I feel like anything that kind of deals with ending life, or like kind of being able to more prominently highlight that to you, or make it like efficient for you to kind of understand when that's gonna happen, I feel like that's where it gets hard to promote that to a consumer, because I feel like that's a hard topic for the general public to kind of think about, right? They don't want to plan for death. They want to plan for how life actually kind of can get smooth. So
I think there's also like a Black Mirror episode where like they know when they're gonna die.
oh yeah,
Like there's like it's like kind of like scary, but like also this is like slightly different, but like it would be like crazy if like there was an AI that could tell you, like if you would know when you would like how long you've left, that would be scary, so like, but in terms of like when you died, that information I feel like is helpful for people after, like for the person who dies, they're dead anyway, right? So like that doesn't really change anything for that person. But if that information of the exact moment I died, like let's say I was murdered, right? If that time helps in the case of like in the investigation, like that would be helpful, right? But like I feel like in general, like for the person who dies, it doesn't really.
There is a movie called The Final Cut where Robin Williams is in, and they have an implanted device that can record in your brain, that records visual and sound, and the idea of it is that when you die, they do a memorial service, and then they have a movie of your life. It's called The Final Cut. Just like this is the final consultation, that is basically the final cut, because that's the last time anybody will edit something about your life. Just like a diary of life, really. And I can't remember, somebody said something and I remembered that. And so as far as implantable devices, so these are already available, defibrillators, implantable defibrillators. Now many people, as you said, do have these watches that monitor a lot of your, I think, heart rate and other bodily functions. And privacy is going to be an issue, as you said. And then if somebody hacks into it, but definitely, I guess, if AI can tell you, that maybe you ate too much, or you should not, drink too much Coca-Cola, or.
Yeah. But I think also we think there's a marketing opportunity here, because you're all sort of strategizing as we talk about this. We talk about the generic human, or we talk about you, because maybe you're different from the generic human. So think of the richness of your internal mental life, right? If it's rich enough, then you don't mind turning off AI, because what you've got going on in there is almost as good as what AI provides, right? Then there are other people who will find out that some people have that internal richness, realize they don't have it themselves, but you could purchase it from some content provider, right? So you could turn off AI and get this alternative thing, which is like what the internal mental life would be of a more creative person than you, right? Yeah, and I think there would probably be, and that's where artists, at least for a while, now I talk about 90 years until everything's completely automated, but in that period, you know, like the next 40 years or something, there's probably an opportunity for people to sort of differentiate themselves, and at least in terms of your self-confidence, if you know you're a person with rich enough inner mental life that you can easily turn off AI and it's just fine, you'll have a certain pride about that, right? I mean, you meet somebody on the street, maybe nobody has jobs anymore, but the thing you then talk about is your inner mental life, you know, and how that's going and so on. And whether you're able to market your inner mental life to other people because it's better than what they have going on. Yeah. So, and it's hard to really imagine what that sort of world will be like, but we don't have to wait very long, I think. So on September 12th, 2024, is when OpenAI released the first PhD level model, right? But it's not an agent yet. It can't like take trips and do all sorts of things. But that's coming soon, and the agency, when it becomes big enough, is to able to run corporations, create them, you know, there's really no limit to this. And that's going to be an amazingly different world from what we have now. And potentially here by 2027, 2028, yeah. Anyway, so one of the advantages of taking this course now, I think, this course has always been about speculative things, speculative content, things that don't exist yet. But now the world is moving so fast that if you learn in 2024 about a certain area of speculative content doesn't exist yet, can actually exist by 2025, 2026, right? And then you can help shape it, right? If we figure out, well, what do we want, what do we don't want, yeah, then you can help shape it. So I've always argued that the course has survival value and will set you apart, because when the future happens, other people will just be totally confused, and you will have visited some of these scenarios in this course, right? Yeah, but yeah, it's becoming real very fast. And I don't know, do any of you feel that the world changed on September 12th, or did you notice nothing and nothing's happened? You know, it's just linear and nothing big is going on? Or do you feel these bumps of the new AI models and the new questions about what's really your creativity, and can you put your name on the product that an AI gives you, and what if that product is 1,000 times better than what you could have done? Can you still put your name on it? And what does that do to the value of your name and, you know, to your own human identity? Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you may have wondered what the course you took was all about, and you're kind of finding out today. Yeah.
I think another question comes to mind, given that discussion, would be like, will AI be granted, or I guess
Moral status, yes,
Yes.
certainly.
will they be given an autopsy if they
Yeah.
do they die? Do
Right.
we offer them an
But
autopsy?
then I've got all these videos about multiple instances of self. Those of you who watch a lot of online movie videos and stuff like that, they often for the song that they're depicting, the protagonist breaks in to multiple instances of self, maybe 3, 5, 7, and that's a very common meme. And in video games you've played, you can also do the same thing, and some of those are active players and some are just sort of mechanically replicating what others are doing. But with that, which I think is also going to be real in the future, you'll have avatars of yourself that can experience things, share that experience with you. And so you'll never miss anything. If there are 3 simultaneous things going on in the world, you want to be at all of them, you can, right? And the parties where you and your avatars get together to share experiences is going to be the best social events in the world, because in the end, it's all really you, right? So it's like ideal. Think of a party of all these different facets of you.
But if they're different avatars of me, but like in a way they're different selves, aren't they? Like, because
I think you
I can only be one
could
place.
decide that. Is there any privacy barrier between them? Can they set out on a new quest independent of the other avatars and so on? How much autonomy do they have? Yeah.
I feel like they like, if they do, they're not me anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like all humans in a way, like, I don't know. It's hard to think about different like instances of me. Like, they wouldn't be me anymore. They would be like a version of me, like copied at one moment of time, and
Right.
then you just.
But
different
it
instances.
also reveals something about your criminal or non-criminal character. When you start talking about multiple instances of self, if you have a strong criminal background, you're immediately scheming how to like fool people and cheat people out of money who think there's only one of you and there's really 3 or 4 or whatever.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you want to meet yourself? Because I wouldn't want to talk to myself. Like, I've thought about this before. Like, if there was another person who was just exactly me, I wouldn't like that. I don't like knowing that there's
That's
another,
like good question.
right? I feel like that's competition. So like, I feel like I wouldn't want somebody to automate exactly who I am.
Yeah, I don't think
Right.
you will like that.
No.
I think we like the idea, but it will be very disturbing because they're not us
Yeah.
anymore. Like,
So
what do you-
you guys can all watch something. I mean, there's a video that I did, quite interesting and short, about not throwing young people under the bus. That's what it's called. But also about Leonard Cohen. And in there you'll hear Amir Grozdanik, the older brother or cousin of the Grozdaniks that you may know, talking about the trip he took with me to Pittsburgh. That was to interview somebody where that person and I claimed to be polar opposite alter egos. So, it's fascinating, eh? But like, if I'm somebody you enjoy being with, wouldn't you think he wouldn't be if he's polar? And that's sort of what happened, So from my point of view, I would have expected that the student regrets taking the trip and so on, but he definitely doesn't. So it's interesting how much he got out of meeting a really, really talented, unpleasant person. And you all realize, we would say, well, how could there be such people? But we all know there are. I don't know if there are women like that, but there certainly are men, right? There are men we all know the names of who are very talented and very bad, right, at the same time, right? And yeah, so that's what we were meeting. So we did 5 hours of video with this guy, and he had sent us a PowerPoint filled with scantily clad women and stuff, and his wife was nowhere in any of the pictures and so on. I mean, it was just, But that's another thing. We're talking about the role of the oral tradition. Stories young people tell each other, but don't write down because they're things that you want to fix. And this is one of them. I mean, the sort of dynamic there, what we encountered is something that we ought to try to create a world where there aren't people like that, right? But by writing it down, you sort of make a hero of the bad guys, right? And yeah. So it's the same. I was telling Cal that one of the research projects I've done most recently that has the most spectacularly convincing data shows that renal medicine physicians have less humor in their writing than any other category of medical person. So writing that down would simply harm people. It would serve no purpose, right? And there are actually many things like that young people could gather together and talk about how you're going to fix the world, how you're going to change these things, right? So what is the reason for that? Well, of course, one of the reasons is that in transplantation, we're reaching only 5 to 10% of the total worldwide need for transplanted organs. Actually, I think it's about 3% if you look at the whole world, right? So 97% of people who need an organ die waiting for it, right? Well, that would make you sort of sad internally. It would interfere with your sense of humor and ability to tell jokes and yeah. So I think that will get fixed, just like many other things. And why should young people be involved? Well, because a lot of these things are currently controlled by older people, right? And if you put them in charge of carrying the story forward, they won't want to carry it forward. It makes them look bad, right? So it's an obvious role for young people. And it's an idea that we're quite proud of, but we don't plan to write down anytime soon. It's in posters. Posters are fine. You know, posters are sort of not permanent, right? So you can put stuff like this in posters, but I don't think it should be in published papers. But there's a lot of work to do with young people fixing stuff that it's so bad you don't want to write down the way it is, right? You can write it down once you've fixed it. Like once we're providing organs to everybody who needs one, then that's the time to write about how much better things now are and how the sense of humor in renal physicians is now better than any other specialty, and yeah, just totally good. Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you for the discussion, and feel free to like you have my presentation, so feel free just to email me anytime, or if you wanted to ask a question, discuss, you wanna go on Zoom and discuss something, or you would like another session.
Yeah, so what about you coming when the radiologist speaks? Is it possible that you?
I mean, if I'm in
Yeah.
town, yeah, definitely.
So he's talking on Halloween, October 31st at 2 p.m. Are you possibly around?
I think I may be at 2 on the 31st. I remember around that time I may have, let me just put this in, LNP, is it 560 or?
590.
590.
Yeah.
590. Let me just check. I think mine is on Thursday. I thought it was on Thursday. I thought I had a presentation. It would have been on Thursday. I have an ethics presentation. I just have to figure out what date it is with the Setter Center. The Setter Center.
Yes, John
Yeah, but
Dossiter. That's the way he said it.
Dossiter.
You
Okay.
can say, well, he said it wrong, but anyway,
Yeah.
Dossiter,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's wrong. So, I'm sure he's right. But I think that would be at 12. So at 12 or 12:30. So I should be able to come when the radiologist is here.
Good, yeah. No, I think that would be good for these guys,
Yeah.
because they don't get a lot of physician talks
Interaction.
here.
Yeah.
And so this would be 3 physicians talking about stuff together.
Yeah.
AI and radiology. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you all.
Thank you.